South America, the continent where literally almost nothing ever happens, and wait, something just happened. No way, people, something just happened in South America, and it's big. What event am I talking about, you might ask? Well, of course, it's the recent events going on in Venezuela, with the capture of Maduro by Donald Trump, in the recent Operation Sovereign Spear. And well, these events that have been spiraling down recently have got me thinking, what would happen if something at the very least somewhat similar happened to Vladimir Putin? I mean, many countries around the world have arrest warrants against him since the war in Ukraine began. And so what would happen if he was to, let's say, in the midst of a trip inside of one of these countries, be arrested? Well, first we need to find out how this would even happen. And making this happen is not easy at all, as Putin is not that stupid to just walk into a country that has a literal arrest warrant on him, and making him transit for a country that has an arrest warrant on him is near impossible as well, because Russia is such a big country and it already directly borders most of its allies. And even if we somehow get Putin to be inside of a country that has an arrest warrant on him, Putin is extremely heavily guarded, with all measures taken to the maximum as to assure his safety at all costs. So of course they wouldn't be able to just snatch him and take him away to prison. And for all the reasons that I have just stated, this scenario is, well, extremely unrealistic and, well, near impossible and very unrealistic to pull off. But for the sake of this video and for entertainment purposes, let's just say that somehow Putin got himself into some country that has an arrest warrant on him, and he was then successfully captured in a Western and or CIA-led operation and taken away to prison to await trial for his crimes he has committed. Now, what would happen after that? Well, it's safe to say that Russia would fall into complete chaos and panic. And I mean, could you blame them? They're in the middle of at least what they consider a very big and important war. Their country has been very weakened and is already extremely unstable as it is. And now this as well? Yeah, it's safe to say that Russia would be in a horrible state, filled with panic and chaos, as the Kremlin would scramble quickly to find solutions to the situation. The war in Ukraine would still continue, although the whole situation with Putin would strike Russia badly, and Ukraine would probably make some advances and slightly push the Russians back, but nothing insane or major at all. Because while yes, Putin might be gone, but that doesn't mean that the military staff or the military itself are somehow now magically gone. They would probably still keep on fighting like they did before, just probably with a much more lowered morale and much less effective communications overall, especially with the higher-ups in the Russian military and the Kremlin, which would be one of the main reasons for Ukraine's successful counterattacks against the Russians. But like I already said, those advances would be small and quickly be halted, as the war would return to its previous state of mostly being a stalemate between the two. Russia's allies would be absolutely furious at the West, and would probably condemn the West for their actions, especially in China, where pro-Putin and anti-Western propaganda would blossom more than it had ever before, with the Chinese using similar propaganda tactics that the Hungarians had used for Trianon, as to fill up the Western world with guilt and sorrow for what they had done. Relations between the East and West would drop to a completely new low, and tensions would rise to a completely new high. And while this would be happening in the East, aka in the Russian-aligned countries, the Western world would be amazed, and it would absolutely be ecstatic and would absolutely celebrate this occasion, especially in Ukraine, where morale would rise back up and would absolutely skyrocket, with new hopes of using the gaps opened up by Russia to finally push them back and end the war in favor for Ukraine. But now, for the question that a lot, if not most people have, would this trigger World War III? And my answer is honestly, no. I don't think this would trigger World War III at all. Sure, tensions would be insanely high, and relations between the East and West would forever be scarred, but I don't think this would trigger a World War III-like scenario. Primarily because of the state Russia would be inside of, as Russia would at the time definitely not be in a fighting state at all. And China was not stupid, nor was it willing enough, to go to war with the entire West almost completely on its own over a single president. Seeing as, well, how that ended up for them a few hundred years ago. But anyhow, with that cleared out, let's go back to check up on Putin and see how he would be holding up in this whole situation. Putin would be absolutely furious at the whole ordeal, although he would actually use the whole situation to his advantage, as to spread as much propaganda around him as possible, with him calling himself the quote-unquote free bear stuck in the hunter's cage on one of his interviews while inside of prison. All of his propaganda made by Putin, the Chinese and other Russian aligned states as well, would of course boost the morale of the people of Russia and the co-workers and soldiers fighting and working for Putin. But it would all be in vain in the long term, because soon enough, Putin's trial day would come sooner or later. And as the trial started and time slowly passed, it was very clear to everyone that this was a similar situation to the Nuremberg trials, and that there was almost no saving Putin from certain punishment, as at the end, the international court would come to the conclusion that for his crimes, Putin would be sentenced up to 30 years or life inside of prison, with many other financial punishments, like having all his assets and gains from the war frozen and taken over, and many other smaller similar punishments as well. This event would be celebrated by the West as one of, if not the biggest accomplishments of the West in the new millennium, and the West would be very happy and supportive of this. But in the East, it would be the complete opposite. Morale and stability would drop to a new low, while tensions would rise to a completely new high. Almost all trade and cooperation between the Eastern aligned world and Western aligned worlds would be completely frozen. In Russia, after the events that had transpired, new quote-unquote elections would be held, with Mikhail Mishustin being quote-unquote elected as the new president of Russia. But of course, Russia would be forever scarred from this and would never be able to truly revive itself from this disaster, nor would it ever forget about this event either as well. NATO and the EU, aka the Western aligned world, would be very proud of the success of their operation, and this would further motivate them to continue making on further similar operations and to continue to fund Ukraine as much as possible, seeing the weaknesses and cracks inside of Russia starting to show and to rapidly grow. This would also bring the Western world much closer together, as relations between many countries in the Western world would start to heal, as we would see the benefits of cooperating with each other against the Eastern aligned world. And so, as the divide between the Eastern aligned world and Western aligned world became ever so apparent, a new so-called invisible Iron Curtain would slowly rise, not just along Europe, but now along the entire world as well, as a brand new war would slowly start to develop. A brand new Cold War.